Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. The US and China agree to resume high-level military communication and work to curb fentanyl production. Biden and Xi say that they are making real progress in California. The meeting took place on the sidelines of the APEC summit. Israel says that weapons and operational command center belonging to Hamas is found in Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. The US president says that Israeli operations will continue until Hamas is no longer able to do horrific things to Israelis. The 10th ASEAN Defense Ministers Plus meeting is on in Jakarta, and India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh is also attending. And five-time champions Australia will be taking on South Africa in the second semi-final of the Cricket World Cup in Kolkata later today. The US President Joe Biden and the Chinese leader Xi Jinping, they agreed during a summit in San Francisco to restart high-level military talks, military-to-military talks. Our correspondent Ira Spitzer has more on that from the location, San Francisco.
This highly anticipated meeting between the two leaders of the world's largest economies has wrapped up here on the sidelines of the APEC summit in San Francisco. Now, this meeting took place at a location about an hour's drive south of the city, and Presidents Biden and Xi spent about 4 hours together. The meeting included a working lunch followed by a walk in the gardens of this palatial estate where the meeting was being held. Now, expectations were somewhat low going in as far as at least having any major announcements on some of the big areas of disagreement between the two countries, including the U.S. and China's position on the island of Taiwan, which China claims as its own territory, as well as the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East. So we didn't see any major breakthroughs on those issues, although the two sides did discuss that. Where we did see some progress, perhaps the biggest outcome of the meeting was the resumption of military-to-military communications between the two countries. Those communications had essentially been cut off from the Chinese side after a series of disagreements, including the visit by then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan last year. So essentially, at that point, there was no one that the U.S. could call in order to manage anything with the Chinese military. So that raised concerns about the competition veering into conflict, as the Biden administration likes to describe it. So that's one big outcome. And the other big outcome from the U.S. side was an agreement to work with the Chinese government to limit Chinese firms who are involved in the production of fentanyl components. Fentanyl is the powerful synthetic opioid, which has been largely responsible for the major overdose crisis here in the United States. So another potentially important agreement there. But certainly just the fact that these two countries meeting at all, given the amount of tension in the relationship, as seen as a victory, but perhaps no major developments in some of these global conflicts where both countries play a major role. Ira Spitzer reporting for DD India at the APEC summit in San Francisco.
Addressing a press conference after the meeting, the US President Biden, he said that the two leaders also talked about the Israel-Hamas conflict. And Biden said that Hamas has committed war crimes by having terrorist headquarters in a hospital. Biden also stressed that the Israeli operations will continue until Hamas is not able to do horrific things to Israelis.
The first war crime is being committed by Hamas by having their headquarters, their military, hidden under a hospital. And that's a fact. That's what's happened. Israel did not go in with large number of troops, did not raid, did not rush everything down. They've gone in, and they've gone in with their soldiers carrying weapons or guns. I think it's going to stop when Hamas no longer maintains the capacity to murder and abuse and just do horrific things to the Israelis.
Well, earlier at the meeting, Xi Jinping called the U.S.-China relationship the most important bilateral relationship in the world. He said that he and Biden shoulder heavy responsibilities for two peoples, for the world, for history.
The China-U.S. relationship, which is the most important bilateral relationship in the world, should be perceived and envisioned in a broad context of the accelerating global transformations unseen in a century. It should develop in a way that benefits our two peoples and fulfills our responsibility for human progress. China-U.S. relationship has never been smooth sailing over the past 50 years or more, and it always faces problems of one kind or another. Yet it has kept moving forward amid twists and turns. For two large countries like China and the United States, turning their back on each other is not an option.
The meeting between the two leaders was held on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC summit in San Francisco. The leaders announced a consensus on nearly all points for the final joint declaration. The ministerial meetings held on Thursday focused on combating corruption, and India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal met with the U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo as well. Let's take a look at DD India correspondent Simon Marks' report.
This summit was in large measure on Wednesday overshadowed by the meeting 40 minutes away from here between US President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. But while that was taking place in the countryside, here in the city, hard work continued in an effort to bridge differences so that this summit can lead to a muscular joint declaration. US Trade Representative Catherine Tai says consensus has been reached on nearly all paragraphs included in the declaration, but tensions were evident here again over the Israeli assault on Gaza, with representatives from Malaysia and Indonesia demanding a ceasefire. American officials say they believe it is possible differences over Gaza and other issues can be accommodated as negotiations continue. Meanwhile, India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal continues representing the country as a guest economy invited here by President Biden. He met US Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, officially launching the two countries' innovation handshake agenda. It was set in train when Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited President Biden at the White House in June. Minister Goyal called the innovation handshake a joint commitment to strengthen the startup ecosystem and promote cooperation in critical and emerging technologies. Commerce Secretary Raimondo defined it as a critical tech partnership, with further events due to take place in Silicon Valley, just to the south of us here, next year. Simon Marks for DD India at the APEC summit in San Francisco.
Here's an update now on this is from the Indonesian capital, Jakarta. It's on the 10th ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting, plus that's underway. And they are strengthening security and defense cooperation. That's on the agenda. The defense ministers from the regional bloc, they called for a ceasefire in Gaza and a durable solution in Myanmar as the conflict deepens there. So India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, as we can see on the screen, is also in attendance. The ADMM, that's the ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting, is the highest defense consultative and cooperative mechanism in ASEAN. The ADMM Plus is a platform for the ASEAN member states and the 8 dialogue partners. That includes India, the United States as well, China, Russia, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand to share notes with each other. And here's an update now on the Israel-Gaza conflict and Israel's defense forces. What have they said? They've found a command center, weapons, and the combat gear which belongs to Hamas terrorists in Gaza's biggest hospital on Wednesday. The military simultaneously released a video showing some of the materials that they have recovered from this undisclosed building in the hospital. The IDF spokesperson Jonathan Cornicus is seen in the video saying that Hamas systematically uses hospitals in their military operations.
Inside the MRI center of the Shifa hospital, Israeli troops breached here a few hours ago, and we have cleared the area, make sure that it's safe. And a few of the most interesting things that we have found totally confirm, without any doubt, that Hamas systematically uses hospitals in their military operations in violation of international law. And what we have found, I think, is only the tip of the iceberg. I'll show you what our troops exposed just minutes ago. In military terms, this is a grab bag, grab and go of a Hamas combatant. And if you zoom in and we get some light over here, what you will be able to see is military equipment. There is an AK-47, there are cartridges, ammo, there are grenades in here, of course uniform, and all of this was hidden very conveniently, secretly behind the MRI machine. On the other side, we found a backpack with what appears to be very important intelligence, including a laptop, and we'll show you that momentarily.
As Israel-Hamas conflict enters the second month, calls for humanitarian pause in the Gaza Strip have intensified by world leaders, and the UN Security Council called for urgent and extended humanitarian pauses in the conflict between Israel and Hamas in the Palestinian enclave for a sufficient number of days to allow aid access. The United Nations Security Council adopted the resolution drafted by Malta on a Wednesday. Meanwhile, the first truck carrying fuel into Gaza since the conflict began crossed from Egypt on Wednesday to deliver diesel to the United Nations aid agencies. The delivery was made possible by Israel giving its approval for 24,000 liters of diesel fuel for the UN aid distribution trucks and not for the use by hospitals. But the UN relief agency UNRWA confirmed that over 23,000 liters of fuel had been received, which they say is only 9% of what they require on a daily basis to sustain life-saving activities. Thousands of protesters gathered in front of Spain's socialists' headquarters after the investiture debate for the acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's new term. Sanchez's amnesty deal with the Catalan separatists has sparked protests. There are 80,000 people in Madrid protesting and tens of thousands in Granada and in Seville. Researchers from ETH Zurich have 3D printed a robotic hand that has synthetic bones, ligaments, and tendons using Inkbit's laser scanning technologies. The team used slow curing plastics for the strength and added a laser scanner to check for bumps or uneven parts, resulting in delicate structure. Mountain lion cubs found in California are undergoing examination by veterinary staff at the Oakland Zoo. The cubs were found after the adult female mountain lion was fatally killed in a car crash. The zoo's intensive care unit will care for these cubs for 8 days, they say, before finding a home. The cubs need to learn survival skills, however, in the wild. Still to come here on DD India Live. India's External Affairs Minister asks Canada to share evidence with India to support their allegation on Niger killing. And the IAEA reports show that Iran has enough uranium enrichment that's up to 60% for 3 atom bombs, while it continues to stonewall the UN. And the US Senate passes a stopgap funding bill to avert government shutdown.
warm up to grandeur that's beyond compare. And history that's dotted with tales of bravery. Smiling soul of India, where music, art, cuisine, and culture comes together to create an unforgettable impression. Punjab is all set to win your hearts with its unique and colorful extravaganza.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution. This series is going to tell stories of such changemakers. Watch Changemakers on DD India.
You're watching DD India Live. My name is Mark Lin. As reported by the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran has successfully enriched uranium to a level near that needed for a nuclear bomb. The nation has shown resistance to providing essential cooperation to the agency, creating challenges for global authorities. The stockpile of highly enriched uranium has increased, but the rate at which Iran is enriching this material has slowed, potentially due to negotiations with the United States. The number of uranium-enriching centrifuges has remained unchanged, contributing further to escalating tensions between Iran and the international community. Despite the ongoing issues with Iran and its compliance, the country is not expected to face severe consequences at the next IAEA board meeting because of diplomatic considerations incurred by other global issues. According to a recent UN World Meteorological Organization report, the levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere have reached a new record high. This happened last year, but the report unveiled that carbon dioxide levels were 50% above the pre-industrial era for the first time. The WMO Secretary General, Professor Pateri Thalas, has highlighted disastrous consequences of further temperature increases. Heat waves, extreme rainfall, glacier melt, sea level rise. The UN agency warned that the current temperature levels, they could persist for decades, even with rapid emission reductions. Meanwhile, to reduce fossil fuel consumptions, this is essential.
We have again broken less comfortable records in main greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. And for example, now we have 150% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than we had during the pre-industrial times. Climate change is not only a temperature issue, but it's wider change in our behavior of atmosphere, and we have already seen practically the whole planet has seen an increase of heat waves. About half of the planet has been facing an increase of flooding events, and 1/3 of the planet has been facing an increase of drought events, and this negative trend will continue until 2060s.
Well, severe Amazon drought damages ecosystem, threatens tipping point, climate change, deforestation, and fires exacerbate crisis. And what's more, scientists warn of irreversible damage to the world's largest rainforest. Take a look.
A dire drought in Amazon has wreaked havoc on the ecosystem, adversely impacting riverside communities depending on fishing and river transport, while fueling persistent wildfires that have enveloped the region's major city in smoke for weeks. In a span of 36 years, Amazon lost 14.5% of its surface water. The drying marshlands could transform the Amazon into a carbon emitter, worsening the climate crisis. The force-fed drought to afflict the Amazon in less than 20 years has drastically depleted the region's crucial rivers, leading scientists to fear that a tipping point is near. This juncture, impacting the forest climate in unprecedented ways, threatens to irreversibly alter the Amazon and transform it into a dry landscape resembling a savanna. The region's sustainability is under severe threat, exacerbated by deforestation and rising global temperatures. To avert further damage, recommendations include designating land as environmental reserves and restoring 6% of the forest. Brazil pledges to reforest 12 million hectares. However, to achieve this, investment of $46.85 billion are required by 2030. An increase in forest restoration projects is needed to combat the irreversible effects of the severe drought and deforestation in Amazon.
India is going to host the second edition of the Voice of the Global South Summit on November the 17th to discuss challenges posed by global developments and also to sustain momentum for the more inclusive world order. And similar to the first edition, the second edition of the Voice of the Global South will be held in a virtual format, and the inauguration and concluding sessions will be of the summit will be hosted by Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. The theme for the inaugural leader session is Together for Everyone's Growth with Everyone's Trust, and that of the concluding leaders session is Global South, Together One Future, Together for One Future. The Indian External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, concluded a 5-day visit to the UK on Wednesday, and last on his itinerary was an interview with a journalist, Lionel Barber, during which he responded to a question on the India-Canada row. He emphasized that Canada has not shared any evidence with India to support its allegation. Jaishankar said that India is not ruling out an investigation, but has asked Canada to provide evidence.
If you have a reason to make such an allegation, please share the evidence with us. We are not ruling out an investigation and looking at anything which they may have to offer.
The Indian Minister of Earth Sciences, Kiren Rijiju, will be visiting the Maldives to represent India at the President-elect Mohamed Muizzu's oath-taking ceremony. This high-level visit, it's a ministerial representation from India at the inaugural ceremony. It underscores India's commitment to further deepen the substantive cooperation and robust people-to-people ties between the two countries. The Maldives is India's key maritime neighbor and an Indian Ocean in the Indian Ocean region, and also occupies a special place in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision of Sagar and also neighborhood first. Efforts are underway on day 5 to rescue 40 workers trapped in an under-construction tunnel in North Indian state of Uttarakhand. As per the public relations officer of the Navyug company, all the trapped laborers are safe and they are being continuously spoken to and communicated with. The workers are also being given medicine as well as food items through a pipe that has been drilled inside. Meanwhile, the American auger drilling machine has completely been set up. The plan is to use this machine, the auger American machine, to drill through the rubble of the tunnel's collapsed portion and insert mild steel pipes, one after another. And then once this happens, the workers trapped on the other side of the rubble can actually crawl out to safety.
सभी लोग चूँकि सबसे लगातार संपर्क हो रहा है, खाना, ऑक्सीजन, पानी, सभी व्यवस्थाएं उनके लिए वहाँ पर की जा रही हैं और सभी संपर्क में हैं, सभी सुरक्षित हैं। भारत सरकार के स्तर से, माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के स्तर से लगातार सभी को निर्देशित किया गया है, इसलिए सारी एजेंसियां और जो तकनीकी विशेषज्ञ हैं अन्य देशों में भी जो ऐसी कठिन परिस्थितियों में काम करते हैं, वो सारे के सारे जो है इस पूरी घटनाक्रम को और यहाँ से जुड़े हुए हैं।
Let's take a look at other stories making the news today. The death toll from the accident in Jammu and Kashmir in India has increased to 39. It's a bus accident. The bus was carrying about 56 passengers. It skidded on the Batote Kishtwar National Highway, and it fell into a gorge, about 300-foot gorge. 17 people are undergoing treatment. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, expressed grief over the loss of lives. He announced an ex gratia of 200,000 rupees to the kin of the victims. There's no respite in sight for Delhi's air quality index. It continues to be in the very poor category. In many parts of the city, the AQI is still above 400. Among other temporary measures, the Delhi Fire Services trucks are sprinkling water in hotspots, 13 of them, to weigh down the air pollutants. A young girl from North India's Jammu and Kashmir has brought laurels to the country by scaling South Africa's highest peak. This is Mount Kilimanjaro. The girl was warmly welcomed in her village, where a large crowd had gathered to meet her. She took 3 hours and 40 minutes to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which is located at an altitude of 19,340 feet. And on to some business news. The U.S. Senate has averted a partial government shutdown on Wednesday as it passed a stopgap spending bill and sent it to President Biden to sign into law before a weekend deadline. The 87-11 vote marked the end of the year's third fiscal standoff in Congress that saw lawmakers bring Washington to the brink of defaulting on a more than $31 trillion debt. But a partial shutdown would have led to delayed salary payments for 4 million federal employees. Let's quickly get to the sports news now. And the 5-time champions Australia are going to be taking on South Africa in the second semi-final of the ODI Cricket World Cup, happening at the Eden Gardens in Kolkata. South Africa have never passed the semi-final stage. They've always fallen at this stage of the tournament. They've been impeded by, a lack of luck perhaps, and also some bad nerves. But they have looked a formidable side in this tournament so far, and they've trounced their opponents, Australia, by a pretty big margin in the league phase. But Australia, on the other hand, are doing reasonably well. They've won 7 games on the trot. That's all we have in this edition of DD India Live. Let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. My name is Mark Lynn. From all of us